Welcome to the Cavcast. I am your host, Nexhex. With me, as always, is Burton. And today we have a very special guest from Bohemia. He is a technical developer, a project lead. He's done some programming, a little bit of everything like that. Today we have Klamacz with us. Welcome, Klamacz, to the show. Doing so well. And again, so good to have you on the show. Let's start. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into gaming, that kind of stuff, and then we'll jump right into some questions.
One. So we played Flashpoint, then we switched to Arma 1, and then we continued to Arma 2. And over the years, I spent a lot of money on Bohemia games. I bought all the DLCs, all the expansions, played through all the different content there was, official and unofficial. And around 2013, when Arma 3 was being put into early access, I managed to sneak in into Arma Free Team as a programmer. So that was, I didn't tell them yet back then, but I kind of acted as double agent sent by my colleagues and friends from the clan with a long list of fixes I was supposed to do for the game. But then I actually started working, and that's where game became actual work. So that's like already 12 years plus since then. And there is a whole progression. Eventually, the company made this decision to put me in charge of some of the vision aspects of ARMA REFORGER. So that's when playing ARMA games from year 2000 up starts actually paying back with some improvements to ARMA games.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. So obviously you made a big transition going from more of the programming side to actually being a project lead. How did the day to day kind of change for you? Obviously when you're focused purely on programming, it's head down working. But now that you're on the project lead side of things, you're doing a lot more Q&As and, delegating tasks and things like that. So how does your day-to-day changed on that aspect?
Yeah, I think the first major change was that I couldn't go for lunch breaks anymore. I had to resign from this half an hour in the middle of the day because there is so many things. There is always someone who needs to talk about something work-related, project-related, people writing direct messages on all the different socials. So yeah, I'm trying to kind of talk with people a lot more. When you're a programmer, you basically are tasked with certain implementation. You may sit on it for a week and don't even talk with anyone else. Sometimes that happens. So it's a lot more focused, detached work where you want to be basically not receiving any other events, right? You want to be detached from the world. You would use your headset and focus on thinking about the code, while being manager or being any kind of lead of team that forces you into walking around and talking with people. That's a big shift. You need to have also character for it. Not every programmer is extravertic enough to be able to handle this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it takes a special person to be able to make that shift. Because like you said, one person's got the headphones on, working on a task for maybe weeks at a time. Whereas now you're in the role of you have to be everywhere all at once. Communication never stops. So I'm sure that for you, because obviously you're very open with the community, you've done a lot of these Q&As and talks and things like that. I'm sure for you, it probably wasn't a terrible transition. I'm sure you enjoy it. Um, and you're known for being open. So how do you find the balance between being, transparent with expectations of the community and, keeping it realistic? Because obviously there's a lot that you can't talk about. But how do you find that balance, especially for someone like you who has done a lot of the back end and now is doing a lot of the front end type stuff?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question, and this is kind of applies to every developer, and especially those which comes from communities and they have some contacts, we have friends, we have involvement in different modding groups.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that we keep certain level of secrecy, and we do not promise things that we are not 100% sure that they are going to be delivered. And this comes, I think when I joined, it was ARMA 3, and project lead Joris, amazing guy, he had this thing like a mantra which was repeating to us often,
Mm-hmm.
to not over promise but always over deliver.
Yeah.
And I think it came also from the long history of ARMA, where the community grows connected to the developers, therefore they can maybe apply more pressure, and then some of the yes we will try becomes they said that they will do it, and then there is a bit of shitstorm after, and nobody likes it. So this very strict rule of do not confirm until we have it done and ready to be released tomorrow. Only then you can say, yeah, we are thinking about it. You know.
Yeah,
So
that's
there is a
smart.
huge gap between what we say and what is really happening.
Yeah, and I think that makes so much sense, especially because, like you said, a lot of these communities, especially for Arma, Arma Squad, Hell Let Loose, a lot of these games with the communities are so involved with the developers and kind of had people like yourself that kind of got into the team to start working on it. Um, there's so much that goes into that and trying to make sure that, like you said, you don't overpromise things because those are the people that you work with on a daily basis. Those are people that you play with, because I know you still play almost probably every week at least, that you don't want to disappoint the people that you play with. You don't want to disappoint the community that you've helped grow. So that makes a lot of sense on why you would handle things in that nature. Even though it may
Yeah,
be disappointing for people that are like, well, I want to know everything. Sometimes people just have to be patient.
yeah. Unfortunately, it's like managing expectations, right? We also have great ideas. People bring feedback. People have suggestions. People want some new content. There is always thousands of those points which what people want, and we probably like deep inside. Most of developers agree with those points. They're like, yeah, that's a great idea. I also
Yeah.
want to do this, but there are so many steps between having the great idea and actually delivering this to the build, that we can only, each of us can only maybe talk about one or few of those steps. There is 10 times more people involved. There is 20 times more time involved in creation, even the simplest thing. So the only thing we can say is thank you for your feedback. We
Yeah.
will think about it. And then only when we actually prototype it, develop, iterate of it, test it, localize it, and do all those steps, when we almost sure, 99% sure that it's going to be delivered in the next update, only then we're going to go say, okay, now we can confirm it. Now let's think about how, in what way we can let them know that yes, this is happening. But we have to be really sure. The worst feeling for developer is when you promise something and then you have to cancel it for whatever reason. And game development is, let's call it difficult. Okay,
Yeah.
it's full of unpleasant surprises, kind of like going to combat. Okay,
Right. Sure. Yeah.
your original plan probably will not survive the whole engagement.
Yeah, that's something that we preach because we do a lot of courses and classes in our community, and that's something that we preach is that you know any plan is great until you hit first action, and then it all goes to shit. So now that kind of ties into my next question, because you were talking about, building new items, especially with Reforger, you built obviously a new engine. The networking is different, and all sorts of other things. So what are some of the things that turned out to be more complicated than you expected when you started making that shift from one engine to the other, and getting more into the new stuff for Reforger that's unique to that game?
Yeah, that's gonna be funny because everything turns out bigger and more complex than expected. It's just natural way of things. Um, we had pretty good idea of what we want to do and how it can be done because we already had it done in ARMA 3. So for many features and systems, the translation, there was not that many questions about what we're gonna do because we already had it pretty clearly defined. There was bigger question about how we're gonna do it, by whom, and in what time. And then, different systems, they interact with each other. As you keep adding them to your game, the complexity grows, starts affecting. There is always something which we didn't expect that we have to add later. So every idea, by definition, grows beyond whatever you expect. We have this rule of estimation that whatever number you think that this work will take me a week, double it, triple it, and you still may be off.
Sure.
Because it's just unexpected things. You may know your system very well, you may have very skilled people, something will happen, something will not work, there will be some edge case in the design which you didn't expect, and now you have to implement completely new system just to fix that one edge case, which it takes another 2 weeks. So everything grows beyond expectations, right?
Yeah, it
And
happens.
some things are bigger than others as well, from all the different, let's say, features or systems of the game. Character is typically the one which grows the biggest and is then very hard to understand and maintain, because in first-person games, everything passes through your character, or like 90% of game functionality is somewhat connected with the character.
Yeah.
Which means that character has to have those relations to all the other systems, makes it a lot bigger code. That was the same case in every game, ARMA, DayZ, whatever engine.
Yeah, and that's definitely, something that's very noticeable right out the get-go. Obviously in Reforger compared to ARMA 3, the way that your character interacts with the doors, the radios, the lights, there's actually like movements to everything. So I totally understand what you're saying when you get to that like realism aspect of like, well, how do I make my character actually interact with the thing that I want them to interact with, instead of it just being a button that appears on the screen but doesn't actually do anything. It just, once you activate it, it activates, but there's no actual interaction. So I'm sure that is a lot of what you're saying, where it's a big transition to see your character interact in a realistic way, doing it right in front of the person as they would see it in first person.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's mostly animation. So between Reforger and ARMA 3, the big shift was into making things visually realistic, right? So make animations for every possible action, as many as possible, fill up the space. I always hated the teleporting into vehicles in ARMA, and I felt like, come on, we can do better. GTA has it, right?
Right.
So that's one of the typical things. Then we eventually in Reforger added opening the doors being a separated action, which has impact on the gameplay. Now you can have a role of a guy which stands in front of the helicopter, opens the door, lets everyone in, and then closes the door after.
Right. Yeah.
That role now makes sense, thanks to dividing the animations in certain ways. So we had to spend extra work playing with this. But yeah, and also it brings a bit more immersion, when what you see on the screen, hands and your body, and other people as well, when they act like they're doing something. And there's still space in Reforger to improve it. Not everything is animated. We have pretty good vehicles and weapons, but for example, turrets still don't have reload at this time. There are still places which we should improve, but we probably will not do 100% as we wanted from the beginning.
Sure.
This thing grew more than we expected.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. It's hard to imagine, especially when you're bringing in consoles and things like that, how big it would grow. I think when our community saw that it was going to be coming out for like Xbox and PlayStation, it was like, okay, how do we adapt for that? And I'm sure you guys had to do the exact same thing. How do we adapt for bringing consoles on, whether it's UI or changing the way that the networking works, cross-play and things like that. So I can totally understand the scope became so much bigger as soon as you bring in something like that. It just changes the way that the game interacts completely.
Yeah, that's true. I think we started planning for consoles a lot earlier than basically from the beginning. It was assumed that this game needs to run on all platforms. So this helps with the stages where developers think about designing how controls would work. Controls were probably one of the biggest challenges because we wanted to fit what ARMA 3 basically uses the whole keyboard for into a controller which has, let me count, 8 plus 4 axes, maybe 14 usable buttons. Of course, you can play with combinations, you can play with contexts, you can try to simplify your control scheme to the point that it fits on this. We used all the different tricks that we were available to basically make it work. But I think it was, at least for controls, it was actually good for the game in the long term because we not only achieved the fact that you can plug in Xbox controller into your PC and play with it or play it on PS5 in the same way, but we also made it simpler for new people to learn how to play the game because now there is less buttons that you have to remember. The buttons are shown on the screen as input hints. You can find yourself operating, let's say, looking through the scope. The buttons which are usable here are contextual, so it's generally more streamlined as for how quickly you can start playing the game and understand the mechanics, what controls you use, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's good for the game long term. UI for console was a bit more hard. The UI, yes, there are some aspects that we cannot use a small font, for example, because it wouldn't look good on certain TVs. You also optimize your UI to be able to go through it with like cursor keys or directional, controls, not mouse.
Sure.
So you also have to think about that. Some things like dragging things between windows, which is common in different, like in Eden, you can drag things around. Those needs to be also redesigned for the controller. That was a lot of work.
Oh, I bet.
And that's only the UX, right? That's only what
right.
player experiences, what he gets on your screen. But there is also the whole back end of things where technology, you mentioned crossplay. It's actually was one of the features I thought it will not happen because it was actually hard. And I was at some point of the project, I was confident that if this may get cancelled because we will not be able to make all three platforms play on the same servers for whatever reason. There are too many rules, too many technical problems, differences, whatever. But luckily, the team worked its way through. We've been a bit lucky; we didn't get into bigger issues, and it happened. And I think it's one of the first games. It's not the first because there was a full crossplay before, but it wasn't still that common at this stage.
Yeah, and I think at least from, the aspect of getting PlayStation and Xbox to communicate with PC, I think with the way that ARMA is set up being, a realism game, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the most realistic shooter games to be crossplay. Obviously, you can get into the other FPSs that are more like an arcade game and, are based on realism but aren't focused on it. Those are probably easier for them to say, okay, well, it's basically just a point and click type game. We don't have to worry about the physics or anything like that. Whereas with ARMA, it's kind of all about the realism. So I'm sure that plays a big part into it as well. And kind of speaking on realism as a whole, how have you found realism? How do you find the right balance with that? Because obviously, with the changes in the UI and the ability to have less input from a keyboard and things like that, how do you get to a point where you're not going too realistic to the point where a controller or somebody that doesn't have as many access buttons can play it and still have it be realistic without it getting to be too much of an arcade type game where you're losing some of that realism?
So we are, this is ARMA franchise. We cannot be arcadish. We have to conform to the giants before us, like ARMA 3. So in every possible system or aspect of the game, we try to be more realistic than in ARMA 3. So if you look at the specific weapon features, properties, I don't know, length of the reload, basically every small things that we could improve from ARMA 3, we try to do. There is a realism of simulation for ballistic, like how projectiles fly through the air, how they terminal ballistic, how they go through objects. This is actually something we just added on top of ARMA 3. So we try to push the envelope further. The hardware of console is not that limiting. There of course, there are some limitations, but it doesn't put us in a place where we have to make the game simpler or less deep in simulation. No, actually that was fine. We had to push it places where the view, distance, rendering, network data, disk speed, those are kind of our limitations, but the simulation was fine. On the other hand, you mentioned also the input and how people interact with the world. A good example is Mortar. I think we try to find a way how, even with the very simple controls, you only have F to use your action, or like whatever is the button on your controller. But all the actions are 3D on that object, and you go around and use those actions. The complexity, the depth of simulation is in how the object works, what can you do with it, how the simulation of firing, recoil, aiming, and so on works, not in your controls. You still control it through basic default action system, which is basically just one button and ability to look around.
Yeah, and like you were saying earlier, it's about the context of where you're looking as opposed to it being just an extra button on a keyboard.
Yes, and I think it's one of the things which actually is repeated in the office. I hear it a lot when there is any discussion about new feature, and someone says, "Well, we'll just add one key." No, you're not adding any keys. Now you go back and rethink it until you find a solution where you don't have to add any key and it still works, because that's the best outcome for us.
Yeah.
But as for the consoles, realism. There is also a big topic or discussion about realism versus authenticity, and it's common question that we have when we have any kind of brainstorm or design discussion in the team. Basically, there is a certain level of realism where it stops being useful for your game. And the perfect example is metabolism. When you have a character which needs to eat and drink, if you make those times as realistic as in 100% realistic, they will have no effect on your game, because you can
Right.
play 2 hours and not get even thirsty. In similar way, fuel consumption in the game may be tweaked, we say gamified, so it's still authentic. There is still consumption. It still matters more for heavier vehicles than for smaller, and so on. It has the aspects which make it deep and interesting, but
Yeah.
it's not scaled to the real life, because that would be basically breaking the game. So to make it viable, we use the term authentic. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Gamified, stretch it a bit. Mortar range is smaller. Many people complain about it in Reforger. Why is it shorter than in real life? You can mod it out if you really want, but when you start using mortars on Stratis, they basically can cover the whole map. And if we wouldn't lower the range on Everon, it would be the same case. We want to have the authentic situation where you can be outside of the mortar range. If you would use fully realistic properties of the mortars, we wouldn't have this.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it also applies to time shifts. A lot of people like playing at night or playing during dawn or dusk or in the daylight. And if you had time be realistic, you'd have to be on for 24 hours basically to experience all the different times. So that's a good point of having it be authentic, but not to the point of realism where it's okay, well, I'm kind of sick of playing at this time. I'd love to, get to nighttime and have flashlights and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a very good example.
Okay. So jumping into the next question. Obviously, conflict has been a mode that's kind of at the forefront or the center of the Reforger experience. So how do you see that evolving over time? And do you want to kind of keep that as the main foundation, or is there other new directions in game modes that you guys want to explore and kind of push and have that be the one that's at the forefront?
Yeah, that's a very cool question. So conflict is evolution of Capture the Island, and then with a bit of experience from Oldman, where Oldman achieved open world environment in which you could have multiple objectives go around. So some of the lessons from here, plus the logic of the game mode from Capture the Island, where basically it's the most challenging objective you can have. Capture everything, use everything in your disposal, from a soldier to rocket artillery, and capture the whole territory. This is the biggest challenge the game can have. So that's basically that. We wanted to have a game mode which has all the features of the game in it, everything that the game supports, every item, every weapon, every vehicle can have a use in that game mode. They all exist at once, and they all are somewhat authentically connected with each other, so they can work in the same environment.
Yeah.
And we make it as big as possible. And we also want to have as many people as possible. So it already achieved that, because I think every now and then we have a little check. We look at the new features and we say, okay, are they actually properly integrated into conflict and usable? Whatever it is, smallest, biggest. Right now we are adding just a modification to M21, I think, with the scope. So scope can be wrapped in a little camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
So we will add it to Arsenal, so it's also available in the conflict, because we want conflict to have everything that the game has to offer. You don't have to play any other game mode to be able to find whatever game has to offer inside. It's just, you have to sometimes play for a few hours this conflict to get ranked up enough to actually be able to fly whatever, but
yeah,
the idea persists. So from that we can say there is no other content that we have to create to expose some of the features of the sandbox. ARMA 3 had this thing that whenever sandbox was expanded by the new thing, we would release playable content which makes use of it. But now we don't have to. We have one playable content which makes use of everything. Right? So of course we still create other playable content, single player scenarios, because there is a lot of people which wants to play single player, completely understandable. Campaign Operation Omega recently, Combat Ops, which is a smaller co-op, something which can be played in a shorter time alone with or with friends. But the conflict, I think, will remain the main game mode, where we always guarantee that everything is integrated, and that may also mean that it will evolve with time, because it will get like new angles, new new space for some new play styles, maybe. You see?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like the showcase of everything. And like you said, as you add new stuff like aircraft or scope, even, big to small, it's going to change the way that everything interacts with each other. So you can use conflict as that litmus test to make sure that everything works together, even though it may take 3, 4, 5 hours to get to having the large scale item. You can still see how it all works together in one cohesive environment.
Yeah, pretty much that. Yes.
Okay. So kind of jumping into aircrafts and things like that. You guys have mentioned in the past getting HOTAS support and different peripherals for maybe driving vehicles and things like that. And you guys have talked about how tough it is to add those kind of peripheral interactions. For people that aren't as familiar with the process and what goes into that, what makes it so difficult to get HOTAS and other peripherals to work with your game?
Yeah, so there are a few things, right? So input from those devices usually passes through the system and then is handled by our engine Enfusion. So on Enfusion side, there is already some code which relates to how those input is understood, from which devices can be taken, what if the device gets unplugged in the meantime or changed into different ones. There is some level of technical support for this, which we had to do, and I think we mostly already did. There may be some little remaining work. And then on top of that, you have to rethink every input which already been handled. So for example, throttle in the helicopters worked in certain way, but when you exchange it with a throttle coming from the device, the way is completely different. So in our case, it was between setting where your throttle needs to be, kind of like autopilot of attitude,
Sure.
versus having completely raw input on the throttle power. And there are some combinations for it. So different devices may have different way they provide the input. So we have to adapt for those. Typically, steering wheels, you not only need to take the input, but you also need to give the feedback back, which needs to be simulated from the game. So this is like additional connection. And the devices go crazy, right? So the simple joystick we already have handled, and even the setup like 2 devices, so have a separated throttle and joystick. Most of the inputs now we are working on making them. I'm not sure if they will be fully bindable, but they will be easier to organize for you. So on your device, you can kind of configure what should it do. So you can, let's say, change how the free look works on your joystick. But there is also a lot of types of those, right? So we were thinking at some point about creating settings for each type. So we basically define how it works on that type. That was the first iteration. But then the amount of types there is, people started creating mods for their own devices.
Right, yeah.
The list grew very quickly. It's good for us because we found some ways to aggregate, like generalize those solutions. But in the end, we had to develop inside UI of the game ability to configure your device and bind things more naturally for users. Yeah, And that's not only because, the question is also about other peripheries, right? So we have a track IR. As one of example, we have official support for it, which is
Mm-hmm.
also interesting because it may overlap. So if you use at the same time joystick, keyboard and mouse, and track IR, you may have three different inputs trying to change your direction of looking. So through those levels of from the Enfusion engine level through how the inputs is understood, then to the game itself, how the simulation is done, but also how like the final UX exists looks for the player. So
Right.
I'm pushing that button, this thing happens, and then my joystick stops working. Like all those little
Yeah.
issues. There is a lot of smaller complexity, a lot of smaller issues spread around, which needs to be solved.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting problem to have because obviously when you're on keyboard and mouse, everybody uses the same keyboard, the same mouse, essentially. Those are all very similar. Same thing with controller. All controllers are very similar. They have almost identical inputs. But then you get into the more complicated peripheries, and it's like, okay, this one can have three different controllers with foot pedals, thrust on one controller, direction on the other. So it's an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. It's not as easy as just saying, you know, A is A, B is B. It's really every controller is different, and like you said, there's so many different ones that people have even made mods for them. So it's it's probably something that a lot of people don't really consider when they're like, well, why can't we have this now? And it's like, well, there's
Yeah.
3,000 different types of HOTAS, and all of them interact similar but different at the same time.
And we have to test them all.
Yeah.
We actually have to have the physical device and make someone sit through it
Oh my
and
gosh.
check all the inputs and play with it for a day. So then that also is some logistic issue of getting all the possible devices
Right.
and being able to interact with them.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot more work that goes into it than I initially realized, and now that you've explained it out, it makes way more sense on why it takes so much longer. Um, Obviously, another big thing that a lot of people have been asking for is kind of destruction, terrain, deformation, that kind of stuff. Um, Obviously, there's some of that into the game already, but if you had like unlimited resources, no technical limits, what would kind of be the dream version of that? And this is, again, I'm not saying that it's going to happen just because you're going to say it, but what's kind of your dream of destruction, terrain deformation, all that kind of stuff?
Um, yeah, well. There are many cool games which played with terrain distraction. Um, at this moment, I cannot remember any titles, but I mean good games,
Mm-hmm.
unforgettable games, where you could dig through terrain freely using explosives or modify. Even I think War Thunder added that you can have tanks with uh, uh, digging
Yeah,
little
bulldozer
positions.
type things. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of cool things that can be done with terrain deformation, and it's not only digging into it and creating, holes for yourself. Even mud or the way how those driving games. I don't have memory
Yeah,
for
like
those.
SnowRunner, where you can like,
SnowRunner, yeah, very good.
yeah,
Which has a big impact on military operations in real life, and something which would be really cool to be able to simulate in game how the terrain deformation impacts
yeah,
your movement, vehicles movement, your cover positions, explosions digging. Like all of this is cool. If I would have in unlimited resources, and it could be my dream feature, probably it would be very physical in a way that sand actually rolls down and doesn't want to keep a high
yeah,
slope, in a way that rocks can roll down and kill you, or you have to break them with higher power. I mean, something which lets you play with it, almost turn it into literal sandbox.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
we're almost like
the
Minecraft, where
physical,
like you can move water down a hill and like completely change an entire area.
right? Physicality of it. I would even say, of course, for combat purposes, for typical meal sim, for average player, the most important would be just let me dig a hole, let
Yeah,
that crater be actually physical, so I can hide in it. Those are like the most important parts. But as a game developer, I would be excited about being able to do such systems which are heavy on physics and realism to the point that you can simulate real situations in them and maybe even learn from them.
yeah,
That it has some represents reality to the point that you can use it in scientific way. That's as a game developer, I would prefer that level.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting, and kind of touching on those physics systems and things like that. Um, Obviously, a lot of people are excited for tracked vehicles like tanks. Um, how do you know get to that point where those get implemented and they interact with the environment without completely changing the way that the game plays, because obviously that's a big part of ARMA, um, and there is some vehicles in the game already, but how do you get to the bigger ones where you're getting the tanks that are actually impacting the way that the game plays, and how do they
Mhm.
interact with that physics system?
Yeah, so interestingly, we have been developing different vehicle simulations since the beginning of Reforger, right? So we had wheeled vehicles and we had helicopters. Um, and those helicopter, for example, simulation was copied from ARMA 3, and then that was one of the two things which were actually copied. Everything else had to be written from scratch. This and ballistic simulation of projectiles was copied in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it gets still highly modified, but the result of it was that instead of being just a feature of the game, that you have a car which has the wheels definition and motor and whatever, or helicopter which has a blades and rotors. Instead of just being the game, it became an engine feature in a way that our vehicle simulation is like probably 80-90% of it is on the Enfusion side now,
Yeah.
which has some amazing results. So this is as being part of the Enfusion now can be used in other games as well. So whatever we do, whatever simulation we are working on for a folder can be used by other games. Also, technically, if we are using the same Enfusion as other games, then their simulation can be available for Reforger, not necessarily used. And that's actual case of now when if you open Workbench of Reforger 1.6, you would find the wheel simulation, helicopter simulation. You would also find track simulation, which
Mm-hmm.
is the technology which is being prepared for ARMA 4, and it's already part of Enfusion. So therefore, technically speaking, someone can create a mod and use it in Reforger to drive the tracked vehicle. Um, the simulation differences, there are some, right? So even on the wheeled vehicles, we go into very much detail on transmission of power, on how many engines you can have, gearboxes.
Right.
I don't even know those names, but there is a whole hierarchy of objects that needs to act with each other for you to be able to drive, which actually put the power on the wheels. And then if you have multiple axles, more than two wheels which are turning, the physics aspects of it are very deep.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most advanced codes in the whole game. And a lot of this can be moved to tracked vehicle simulation in a way that, yeah, you still have motors, you still have gearboxes and many of those elements. What changes mostly is how you interact with the surface. So the tracks themselves physically are completely different than tires. And then you basically have to simulate a chain of blocks which are pushing on each other and pulling on each other and moving on that trajectory around the wheels. You also have to simulate the wheels.
Right.
Um, then you also have to simulate that. I don't remember how exactly it's called, but the fact that when you turn one of the tracks works the other way than the other, or is stopped. So yeah, there is maybe like 20-30% of the simulation which has to be changed, and maybe additional half of it needs to be added on top to move from wheeled simulation to the tracked simulation. I cannot say how far we got into this because that would be spoiling the future.
Sure.
Modders can already play with it on Workbench, so you can just go open it and see yourself how it is implemented, what kind of properties you can have, what kind of sub-objects you can add to it. And I think we will use this, the fact that it's kind of, we didn't intend it, it kind of got there by accident and it got leaked to everyone. But we will use this as a value in a way that if some modders are playing with this technology and their game crash, we receive crash reports so we can look at the bugs, at the problems caused by the tech and fix them before it becomes available through ARMA project.
Right, through official terms. And that kind of ties into my next question. Obviously, with things like that, you kind of get into these feedback loops with the community. So what does that kind of look like these days? Do you guys have modders or players that you guys have long-term relationships with, or people that you guys might look at behind the scenes secretly, that you're like, oh, I know this guy is working on mods and I'm going to see what he's up to see how it will impact our game, or how we might be able to take some of the feedback from their mod and work it into our game. So what does that look like for you guys? Do you guys have people that you look at and say, ooh, they're doing some interesting stuff, let's get their feedback, how they're interacting with tracks or how they're interacting with the driving systems, things like that? Is that something that you guys do, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the first funny thing is that probably like 20-30% of the team are modders themselves.
Oh.
So it's hard to even say that we have some modders that we look up to and like listen to their feedback. We have modders working on the stuff and having the feedback ready. But then, yes, we also have a direct connection with many modding groups. We have constant flow of inspiring videos or screenshots or whatever modders do. We have such channel internally where if some developer finds a cool mod, GIF or video, something cool happening. Like recently we had Ace doing the, how's it called? The burning barrels on MG, basically. Someone reposted it locally, and we started discussing how is it done and what can we know from it, what can we learn from it, how they use this material, and they use that kind of shading, and they drive it through this. So we sometimes get inspired. We don't usually, I don't remember such case that we would straight take someone's solution and put it in game. That doesn't happen.
Sure.
But we get inspired, and we get. We also look at every feedback we can find. So we constantly scan Discord channels, Reddit, Twitter, whatever feedback tracker, of course, for whatever people say, and there is a certain risk in limiting the feedback sources. So if you would only limit ourselves to trusted people, that gives us only little angle on, in comparison to 360, which we should have.
Sure.
So I'd rather read through thousands of messages, but get some statistical knowledge about how the future is looked at by people in general, not only trust one guy which says this is good, this is not good. Of course, we still use those direct connections, those friends, and sometimes people that we work on our free time with anyway. We use this as a source of information, but it's not deciding one. It's not defining one. When we make decisions or about if we're gonna work on that feedback or not, those decisions are mostly based on what we've been thinking, brainstorming, discussing, designing, planning for last 3 years.
Sure.
And now someone mentioned this and like, oh yeah, you remember that thing which we wanted to do? This guy is complaining. What we gonna do about it? Oh well, maybe. It's actually rare. Okay, not that rare, but let's say I would say 10%. 10% of feedback brings something that we didn't think about yet. I know it's maybe not a good thing to say to community because it may sound demotivating. No, keep writing your feedback. This is still very important.
Right.
But also understand it's our work. We spend, sometimes 8 and sometimes 12 hours per day thinking and working with all those things. Every little bug passes through 10 different people. This is our context. We actually probably thought about it, went through this, tried it, scrapped it, canceled it, turned it back to it, and made another 5 steps with it behind the scenes before
Right.
someone wrote that line. But
Well,
generally,
it's also, I was going to say
feedback is very,
it's also like how you said you want to make sure that it interacts with the whole operation, right? The whole game mode of conflict, the whole grand scheme. Like you were saying, you guys try all these things on the back end and do little bits, but you have to make sure it all works together. So even if it's a little bit of feedback from the community, you have to make sure that that fits into the whole picture of ARMA REFORGER, which doesn't always happen. So I'm sure that's why you were saying that sometimes you have to go back and start over and rework it to make sure that it fits into that whole scheme.
yeah, that's also true. We had pretty clear vision of what we wanted to achieve, and that vision was mostly verbalized through the roadmap. So the roadmap, as we released the 3 stages, this was the idea. That's how we intended the game to look. But then also, while we were working on it, we would find another 10 things that we should be doing, we should be adding, or we should be changing. Some of them coming from feedback, some of them coming from our own creative process. So in the end, it took us like 3 times longer than we wanted to deliver on all the roadmap features. But it's not the only thing which we brought, right? It's like probably 10% of what we really brought to the game is the roadmap. There were probably some things that we removed from the roadmap and then did them anyway, and added them later. So the vision is somewhat clear and structured and defined, but it's also evolving with time as we see what happens with the game and we find new angles to look at the same problem, and maybe we'll change it that way.
Yeah.
Feedback, all the feedback is definitely important in it for us. We have to read it. We have to be bombarded by this knowledge of what community thinks about things. I know Justin is now scratching his head like, I don't want to be bombarded. But it is, eventually it is good for us to know what's the reception, what's the feeling, what's the reaction
Right.
of many people.
Now, kind of tying into the modding community and things like that, obviously there's a lot of mods that have been around since ARMA 2, ACE, things like that. How have those modding systems that have been around for so long impacted the way that you guys maybe set up the user experience for Reforger? Is there things that you see from, ACE, for example, that you're like, oh, this would be a really great way to import that into Reforger because they do a good job with, let's say, like a user wheel or something like that? So how does that modding community kind of shape the way that you guys make real change in Reforger?
Mm. I think over the years, the biggest impact of the modding scene is that it forced us into thinking wide and wild in a way that whatever we create, whatever system we create, someone will push it into areas that we cannot expect, and it's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, so when we create weapon systems, we have to think about, oh, RHS will want to do 700 versions of M4. So maybe let's break it down into subparts so then modders have it easier to create many different versions. Maybe let's think about attachment system so it's generalized between mods. And when we work on uniforms, let's try to define such prefab definition that modders can easily do retexture. One of the most common modding type of work, or like the first thing that people want to do is usually retexture something. So
Sure.
we intentionally designed our systems that retexturing should be easy, that RHS will be able to do 700 versions of the gun, that ACE will be able to play with medical system and add items and add damage effects and do whatever they want. This is a big part of the development process, like making sure that everything is as moddable as possible. And then, as you said, there is the other side where they inspire us by doing something which maybe we didn't even predict that can happen. And we start looking at, okay, well, maybe it would be cool to have it in game. My threshold for this is very strict. So for me, the feature which needs to go into vanilla, those needs to be features which expand on vanilla. It's hard to explain, but it has to be certain ARMA realism feature. It cannot be a wild thing. Let's not add things which are not what you would expect in ARMA. I don't know how to explain this.
No, I understand what you're saying.
It's usually case by case. Someone comes with the idea, oh, it would be cool if you would have something from whatever, from whatever mod. Oh, they have this cool sound. But does it fit or does it not fit? Is it important for everyone or not? Best example I have is CBA from ARMA 3. CBA as the community something. But basically, it's about callbacks. It's a special set of callbacks that modders can use and are generalized for everyone. This should be a vanilla. This should be moved to vanilla because it has a value for the community itself. And there is also maybe a value for the modder. Someone creates a cool thing, and then he maybe wants to leave and do something else with his life, not necessarily spend another 20 years maintaining the mod.
Right, yeah.
Just so some obscure people play this game with his mod. So I would say if mod grows to the point, or solution grows to the point that it becomes default mod for everyone, this is the moment when I would say, okay, let's look at this. Can we make it a part of vanilla? But then there should be a separated process for it. We should credit the people which brought this value. If we are taking the value, someone did a script or a asset, whatever, then we should consider this basically as a business relation at this stage.
Right. And there's definitely been basis for that. I mean, in ARMA 3, there was a lot of mods and modders that became actual official content for ARMA 3. So it makes sense, and it's good that you guys are willing to give the credit where credit is due when it is something, like you said, that becomes a default for every single community to use, for example, CBA. So I think that that's a really cool thing that you guys have done and have continued to do throughout the years. I don't think many developers are willing to give credit for that kind of thing. I think a lot of them want to take credit for everything because it probably looks better on, paper and value for them. But I think that's something that Bohemia does very well, in giving credit to those modders that have really helped shape the community and the way that the game plays and interacts with each other. So jumping in kind of to a little bit further questions, and we'll try and wrap it up here because I know we're getting close to the hour. But kind of looking ahead, what's one feature or system that you're most excited about that you think could really change how people view Reforger when you compare it to previous ARMA titles?
Oh, that's that's a tricky one.
Without, obviously, I'm sure you can't give away too much, but
You mean existing one or
uh,
future one?
future one.
That's a tricky part of the question. Justin, help! No, yeah, that's a hard one because I would say right now with HQC we already changed the game upside down as for the rules of conflict. So the game should be very much different, fresh for everyone. Plus we added Kolguyev, which is a completely new environment. Obviously, that would be a lot of new things to see. All of those campaign as well, all of those things are very impactful on how the game can be perceived or played.
Yeah, so just exciting new stuff, basically. I mean, new
Yeah.
maps, new content, new game modes, all that stuff's really good. And obviously, I'm not trying to get you caught up or
I'll tell you
anything,
one.
but
Okay, I'll give you one. So I had this discussion with Sir Ironbird some time ago about conflict being a sandbox or not sandbox, and I disagree with him. He says it should be a match. It should be defined, rule-based match, which has maybe even time limitations and is understandable. You can play it as PvP game mode against someone. I still treat conflict as a sandbox. It's simulation of the war. What I would really want to have is ability to show different types of wars that can happen. Right now we simulate one where we confront organized army versus organized army. That's like the peer-to-peer type of combat.
yeah,
This is rare in real life. No, I mean, not now, but it's rare. There are so many other types of conflict where the rules, the balance between sides or situations, circumstances of that conflict are interesting. So we
sure.
have everything from patriotic uprising down to total annihilation. Like there is a whole spectrum of possible
Yeah.
conflict types, right? So I think for me, what's eventually maybe exciting for future of conflict is that we would treat it as sandbox and we would add angles and play styles which weren't possible before, but it would allow us to simulate more types of wars, basically.
Right. Not just completely even, but,
Yeah.
uprisings or revolutions or whatever. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. It's a unique idea, and I know that in the past there's probably been mods that have done similar things, but to have it be based in part of conflict would be really cool, especially with the way that conflict escalates over time, as you play and level up and get access to more things. I think that would lend itself very well to what you're kind of speaking on. So we'll kind of get to our last couple questions here. If you could go back to the very start of Reforger and, the announcement a couple years ago, with the knowledge that you have now, what's something that you think you would do differently? Whether that's the roadmap or the way that it was launched or whatever. What's something that you would do differently with the knowledge that you have now?
Yeah, that's also a very tricky question, and thank you for the suggestions because both are valid. That helps.
Yeah.
One thing which kind of would definitely change is right now we know Reforger is a good game. We have 10,000 of people minimum playing it every day just on PC. Double it, triple it because of 3 different platforms. That's a lot of people enjoying it. There was a time in the beginning of Reforger where those numbers were very, very small. So if I would have my knowledge from now back then, I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't have to go around and keep motivating people. Let's work harder. Because we would know it's gonna be successful. We kind of
Yeah.
knew, we
Yeah.
kind of felt the potential is there. We just need to break through the initial technical problems, mostly the network and performance and crashes. And then also as the mods come to the game and start bringing more content, it becomes wider and wider. And this initial complaint of people that it's maybe not enough fun, not enough things in this game
Sure.
to pay for it, that would dissipate, would disappear as well. If I would have the full knowledge of now and go back, I probably would just everything the same with knowledge that we're gonna pull it out. That's
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
would happen. But you mentioned two things. You mentioned initial release, and I think that's a good point. We could probably I would postpone the initial release by I don't know a few months to make sure that we can get rid of the some of the kicks that happened.
Sure.
So maybe the initial reception would be better, but also shifting it forward would have a cost on like we started it earlier means that we also achieved the good result earlier. So our good results would also get shifted by 6 months, which could have some other impacts. It's not that obviously good or bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same
Yeah.
with the roadmap. Maybe I'm sure many of my colleagues would say, let's not release any roadmap
Yeah.
or release it very blurry instead of being very precise about which exact anti-tank mine we're gonna deliver, which basically blocks us from any flexibility as for what we are doing. We have to do exactly what we said.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't that good idea, but in the end, I also think this forced us into delivering on the initial vision which we had. And if we wouldn't have that precise roadmap, maybe some of the things wouldn't actually happen because we would have an opportunity to say, well, let's do something else instead. Maybe the scope of the game and the features that we delivered, maybe it would be worse, and maybe
Yeah.
the success would be smaller, and maybe the game would be worse. So it's hard to definitely say this was a mistake. This wasn't a mistake. I'm sure there were many mistakes that could be avoided. Bugs, we have thousands of bugs that we could be avoided, right?
Sure.
But I think with the current knowledge, going back, I would do the same thing, just knowing it's gonna work out.
Yeah. I think you're onto something by saying you need those not mistakes, but you need those lessons to be able to impact where you're at today. And if you were to change anything, then obviously the game may or may not be in a better state or a worse state. So it's pretty insightful to say, it would have been nice to know, just for the motivation purposes, to say that we would get to where we wanted to be. Obviously, knowing that, it makes it a lot easier to continue the work that you're doing. So my last question for you, and this is not a hard one, but just kind of one that I'm sure is something that gets brought up a lot in the community. A lot of people in the community always viewed or thought that they viewed Reforger as kind of a bridge to ARMA 4. But obviously it's its own game. It's developed into this juggernaut of itself. How do you decide what is best for Reforger as a game without it impacting maybe a future title or something that could be coming down the road? How do you decide what's best for you guys developing Reforger as a game?
Mm-hmm. So when we decided that we're gonna do the next ARMA, there was discussion, there was some pre-production, there was some research going on, and of course a big part of it was preparation of the technology. And at this stage, engineers, I was one of the programmers being thrown at one of the systems that has to be prepared. So I didn't really have that much of a wide view over the vision and the plans for next ARMA. But what we all knew is that if we want to achieve next ARMA, we have to do a step over RV engine. We have to get out of the RV engine, and we have to rethink and re-implement all the things that were there in the new one. And when you start listing those things, the list is huge, right? It becomes so insanely long, and it's almost impossible to. You can plan it, but it's going to take 10 years. So we also knew, okay, we cannot spend 10 years working on complete rebuild of ARMA. We have to do it in a smaller scale. So one of the first decisions that were made was, okay, we're going to scrap. We're not going to do tanks, we're not going to do boats, and we're not going to do jets. We're going to do infantry with a small vehicles and maybe helicopters. That's going to be our focus. We will build it like it would be better than Arma 3, but smaller. Okay, so it has to be better in every aspect, but it will not be as wide. So that was the first very clear limitation, and actually allowed us to create a game which could be released and can be played, because we had this strict limit of how far we're going to push it. And then eventually, of course, we have a bunch of discussions, even now, that happens every other day, that we have discussion, something pops up, there is maybe a new technology, there is maybe some feedback coming from players, maybe some unfinished task, and we have this discussion, should we do it right now for Reforger? Should we do it for ARMA 4? How are we going to distribute this value? And a lot of those discussions are based on what kind of resources we have available, how many people can effectively work on it in Reforger versus those which are already, working ARMA 4. Does it need, and like what kind of impact it would have on Reforger versus on ARMA 4? If there is any risk that we would slow down development of the next ARMA, then we're not doing it, because that's something which we don't want to do. We want to actually speed up the development of ARMA 4.
Sure.
Help it as much as possible, so it can take over what Reforger built up already. So yeah, it's basically case by case, but with a strong bias on safety and quality of ARMA 4 first. We already delivered on most of our promises. The only thing which is missing from the roadmap is electricity, which is something I don't want to talk about. This is a wild card. This is gonna be crazy one. But we'll see in the future. I cannot really say anything. So we really don't have to add some big things that would risk ARMA 4. We can focus now on polishing and improving the game as it is. We have many bugs to fix. We have many little tweaks that we can do to make players' lives easier. There are some interesting smaller features that can be done from existing assets and existing systems already there, just by connecting the functions slightly different, exposing some options that we are almost prepared for, but we didn't do them yet. So there is enough exciting smaller things that we can do for Reforger that we don't have to try to compete with what ARMA 4 will be in the future.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm pretty sure it will be a very, very exciting game.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys need testers, let us know. Our community is probably happy to help, develop anything for you guys, whether it's Reforger or ARMA 4. I know we have a lot of really passionate people. So if you guys are ever looking for more testers or a large community to help you test out ARMA 4 or Reforger stuff, definitely let us know, because we're happy to do it. And we have a wide variety. Sure. We got console guys, PC guys. So you would be able to get a large group of testers.
You have to be careful, because when you start working on things and you look at especially during development, like in deep development, the game can be frustrating actually.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Actually have an opposite effect on you, especially if you love the franchise, love all the ARMAs. Then when you see a game which is half done, it kind of breaks the magic.
Yeah. It ruins it. You see behind the scenes. It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, remove the veil of polish that you're talking about with Reforger, and it just becomes framework that doesn't work the way you want it to yet.
That's actually how it is, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I know it's been a long road, and you guys have been working very hard. So it's nice to have you take some time and meet with the community and talk with us. And it's obviously been a huge pleasure for me. Is there anything that you want to share with us before we sign off?
Oh, that's like a hidden question.
No, it's just if you have anything that you want to share. If not, totally fine. Or if you just want to, have a final remark, whatever you want to share or whatever.
Well, I would like to thank you all for playing the game, for being with us for so many years. You started, you said 2002?
Yeah, 2002. Yep.
That's crazy. That's a lot of years.
Yeah, it's a
and
long
lot
time.
of people putting free time and their efforts into running scenarios and events and bringing people together, being involved. We often say that ARMA, or I at least say ARMA is like a coin. It has two sides. One side is us, Bohemia, and the other side is us, the community. And this coin wouldn't exist if those two sides wouldn't be there. We have to coexist, and it's kind of up to us to make that to make it all happen. It's not enough to just have a good game. There needs to be those thousands of people which play it and get passionate about it. And it's really important for us as well, because sometimes receiving the thanks for the good game, thank you for your effort, is what we as developers need. Little thanks, little positiveness, so we can keep going and work hard for you.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing what Reforger still has yet to polish and bring out, and obviously looking forward to future Bohemia titles. And like I said, it's been fantastic talking with you today. So until next time, much appreciation. Thank you all of our listeners and viewers. This is actually our last episode that we're doing for the foreseeable future. So we're going out on a high note talking with you. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.